At 3 in the morning, the snow stopped falling on Widow's Ridge. That is when Caleb Reyes found the handprint. 5 fingers and a palm, pressed perfectly into 3 feet of fresh drift, with absolutely no tracks leading to it or away from it. Caleb was a former Forest Service ranger who spent his winters entirely alone. He requested this specific winter posting at a remote station precisely because nobody else wanted it. No town, no people, and 0 chance of contact. 3 years earlier, a hiker called his station during a whiteout. Caleb told her to stay put. When the weather finally cleared, he found her body a half-mile away. She had ignored his advice and tried to walk out on her own. He responded to that outcome by removing himself from the world. Caleb treated this grueling solitary confinement as a form of penance, isolating himself to ensure he would never be responsible for another life again. His refusal to forgive himself turned the station into a psychological prison. He was a rescuer, punishing himself with an endless search for redemption, while actively refusing to let himself find it. That isolation ended when a woman crashed onto his porch in the middle of a massive blizzard. Her name was Mara. She was half frozen, yet her eyes were sharp and aware, completely missing the disorientation that accompanies severe hypothermia. When he hung her coat by the door, it was bone dry, despite the whiteout she'd just stumbled through. Outside, his own deep trenches to the woodpile were the only marks in the snow, as if Mara had simply materialized on the porch without ever touching the ground. Still, for the first time in 3 years, Caleb had to care for another human being. Sharing meals and stories over the next 3 days forced a violent interruption to his carefully maintained cycle of emotional numbness. Then, the station radio hissed to life on its own. It broadcast a frantic distress call from a hiker lost on the ridge. The voice belonged to Mara, but the logbook timestamp beside the machine was from 10 years ago. Mara was physically trapped on the mountain, completely unable to remember her past or leave the station. Caleb was psychologically trapped by his guilt. 2 ghosts haunting the exact same space. The strange reality of their situation pushed Caleb to say the unspoken truth out loud. He confessed his failure to Mara, the call he took 3 years ago, the order to wait, and the life it cost. Breaking his silence created a shift. Driven by her admission that she had no memory before arriving at his door, Caleb pulled a water-stained archive binder from behind the filing cabinet to check the station's history. He found a survey log from a decade earlier. 3 names were marked rescued. The 4th was Mara Voss, missing on this ridge 10 winters ago. The 11-day search was suspended, leaving her file open, an active missing person case. The Mara standing in his kitchen was the same Mara recorded in that fading ink. She hadn't just arrived, she had never left. She was a frozen moment in a rescue operation that the Forest Service had simply walked away from 10 years prior. To heal, Caleb had to stop avoiding his duty. His only way out of the darkness was to do for Mara exactly what he had failed to do 3 years earlier. He had to be the rescuer who finally showed up. That night, the temperature in the cabin plummeted. The mountain aggressively attempted to reclaim Mara as thick, jagged frost rapidly encased the interior walls. As the radio screamed Mara's decade-old plea over and over, the overlap became clear. The mountain wasn't trying to kill him. It was looping a recording that had never been answered. To stop the cycle, he didn't need a weapon. He needed a protocol. He grabbed the old CB radio and keyed the emergency channel. He broadcast his station identification, formally stated Mara's name, and declared the subject located. He told the mountain the search was over. By executing standard search and rescue protocol, he provided the official closure that had been missing for 10 years. The moment he spoke the words, providing the answer the distress call had been waiting for, the storm instantly ceased. In releasing Mara from her 10-year entrapment, Caleb achieved his own emotional release. He had finally completed a rescue, executing the psychological closure he desperately needed to address his own crushing guilt. When the spring thaw arrived, Caleb hiked out past the tree line. He found what the original search teams never did, and he buried Mara's remains properly. The following winter, he did not request the isolated posting at Widow's Ridge. The vicious cycle of his self-punishment was broken. This flowchart maps the progression of emotional closure.
True closure requires an active choice rather than passively waiting. Notice the mandatory bottleneck. You cannot bypass active confrontation. To reach release, you must acknowledge your failure. To escape the prison of a past mistake, we have to stop hiding in isolation. We have to face the guilt directly, say the failure out loud, and officially declare that the internal search is over.